So let's just talk about your building safety case report. And I think that one way to describe the building safety case report is it is a description, a narrative that is a snapshot in time that describes what it is that you are doing to identify the risks, to measure those risks, and to manage those risks. It demonstrates that you are keeping your building up to date. Now, here's the thing. With working with a few clients as I have been doing, what I'm finding is they've got some bits of information that's missing. And because they've got some information missing, they're never going to have all the information that's necessary to have a full set of golden thread information. So we just say in the report, we haven't got that information, but Mr. Building Safety Regulator, there is a plan that we have for the next few weeks or months or whatever to put that missing information into place. Now, some information, I'm going to say to you, is more fundamental than other information. So if I said to you, you want to go ahead and submit your building safety case report to the BSR without a fire strategy, I'm going to suggest to you that a fire strategy, given that the legislation is about, dealing with fire, if you don't understand your building and how your building is to perform in the event of a fire, i.e. via your fire strategy, because it's missing, that I think it's going to be very, very difficult to demonstrate to the building safety regulator that you are managing the risks associated with your building. I'm going to say to you that something like missing your fire strategy for the building is just too fundamental to miss. But there may be other bits of information, like I don't know, the layout of the building, the general layout of the building. If you haven't got a plan that shows the general layout of the building, that might be something you want to try and get hold of in a relatively short space of time, but it's not something you have to get immediately. And I'm hoping you can see the point that I'm making. Some things are really too fundamental to try to miss when you're submitting a building safety case report. Other things you could have a bit of a narrative around to explain to the building safety regulator, we haven't got it, but there is a plan to get that over the coming weeks or months or whatever. You're going to have to also, in that building safety case, make sure that you have shown what sort of resident engagement you've got in place. There should be a system that you will use to inform residents in the safety matters of the building, but also involve them in dealing with some of the safety matters of the building. And then there's this funny thing called a mandatory occurrence reporting system and procedure. And what that's about is when there is an incident, say a fire-related incident, or maybe a structural-related incident at the building, there must be a process by which you will say, well, okay, an incident has occurred. Some of those incidents may be relatively minor, and so you don't report them to the building safety regulator because they're easily dealt with and nothing major. But others, it'll get to a threshold, won't it, where you need to report to the building safety regulator, and that sort of reporting system needs to be established in a document that communicates that to the building safety regulator. He will expect you to tell him what reporting system you are going to employ at this building. Golden thread. Now, this is that digital record that I was telling you about of a whole load of documents that are related specifically to your building. And they should be kept for the entire life of your building. I'm talking about your fire risk assessments and your fire strategy, the plans for each floor of your building, your structural engineer's report, your fire engineer's external wall assessment, etc., and a whole range of others. And it's about making sure that information is accessible by the residents of your building, accessible maybe even for the building safety regulator, but accessible for anyone who is a stakeholder of that building. Okay, golden thread information. Let me go on to gateways, because one of the things that the building safety regulator has established is a gateway process. Gateway 1 is around the planning stages. Now, I'm assuming that what the building safety regulator becomes is in effect a statutory consultee of the planning process, and you won't be able to get past gateway 1 until the building safety regulator has said all the fire safety considerations have been addressed. I'm going to sign off on gateway 1. You will not be able to start on your detailed design until you've got all of gateway 1 considerations dealt with. And then once you've done your detailed design, once you're doing your detailed design in gateway 2, again, you'll have to have all of those issues signed off. So if you've got, I don't know, extended travel distances, and you need to demonstrate using CFD analysis that you have a compliant building, if that's the case, they will want the CFD analysis to have been checked by a third party and signed off. They'll want all of the drawings to have been checked and agreed and signed off as being compliant with the regulations, building regulations. And until all of that has been done, you will not be able to put a spade in the ground to start building this thing. So, what's gone on up until now, where we are building buildings and trying to get building control approval of our designs, and building control approval of the CFD, and building control approval of, I don't know, whatever else, fire strategy still being developed for the building as it's being built. Those days are gone. Okay, you can't do that anymore. You will not be able to put a spade in the ground until all of the design issues have been signed off by the building safety regulator. And I ought to just mention to you, the building safety regulator is under-resourced, and there is already a backlog of work that they need to go through. So then gateway 3 is the preoccupation stage, where you'll do your building work. So remember, I'm talking about new builds now. I am not talking about legacy buildings. I'm talking about new builds. The preoccupation stage, when you're doing your construction phase, you will not be able to have anyone occupying that building until the building safety regulator has agreed that everything that has been put in is to an acceptable standard, and they sign off the building and give a certificate for occupation. Okay. Now, I'm going to say to you, and I'm not a clairvoyant. I've been around for far too long now, and I've seen this sort of thing far too often, where the government brings in new legislation, and the rest of us on the ground have got to pick this up. I can see straight away this is going to have disastrous implications on our ability to bring forward new housing. And given that the government has a serious priority around, the housing deficit and making sure we bring about new housing, this is going to be the single thing that is going to slow that right down. And I'm going to suggest that this will go on probably for a couple of years until the big house builders go to Mr. Starmer and say, look, or Sir Starmer, and say, look, this can't go on. We cannot deliver the housing for you because this gateway process just stops everything and slows everything right down to virtually zero. So I think you're going to find that maybe in a few years' time, I'm predicting that there will be some calls to change this, because I can't see how it's going to be practically achievable going forward.